During a cross-country trip to clear my head after a painful breakup, I found myself hiking in Utah. My ex-fiance's betrayal with one of my closest friends left me reeling, and I hoped the solitude of the Wasatch National Forest would provide some peace. Known for its seclusion and breathtaking views, it seemed perfect for a lone hiker like me. I drove down a narrow access road deep into the forest, parked my car, and prepared for the trek. With no phone service and my route mapped out offline, I felt ready for the adventure. My goal was to reach a lookout point at the mountain summit, a few miles away. About an hour into the hike, light rain began to fall. Annoyed, I decided to turn back. Hiking in the rain wasn't my thing. When I reached my car, dread washed over me. All four tires were slashed. My stomach sank as I realized this was no accident. Whoever did this was likely still nearby. I scanned the forest, listening intently, but the rain muffled any potential sounds. With no cell service and 20 miles of desolate road to civilization, I had no choice but to head back into the woods, aiming for the high ground where my original destination might offer a signal. As I hiked, I noticed a faint rustling sound behind me, matching my movements. I didn't dare look back. My pace quickened, my heart racing as the sun dipped lower, casting eerie shadows. I finally glanced over my shoulder, nothing, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. Reaching the summit, I was relieved to find cell service. I immediately called the police, explained my situation, and gave my car's location. Though I felt some relief knowing help was on the way, I still had to descend through the darkening forest, avoiding whoever or whatever was stalking me. Using my map, I plotted a semicircular route to avoid retracing my steps. At first, everything seemed fine, but soon, twigs snapped to my left, then behind me. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just one person. There were multiple. I broke into a light jog, only to stumble upon a hidden campsite. 12 logs circled a fire pit, and it was clear someone had been there recently. Panic surged as I spotted a foot dart behind a tree. My jog became an all-out sprint. The forest erupted with movement, and I realized I was being chased. Glancing back, I saw six figures dressed in white closing in. Exhaustion threatened to overtake me, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Finally, I reached the road where a police car waited. The officers couldn't find my pursuers, but their presence was a lifeline. They explained that Utah forests are known for secluded religious groups and cults, and I might have stumbled into one of their territories. Even now, I can't fully comprehend what happened. If I was trespassing, why not simply tell me to leave? The fear of that day lingers, and it's a haunting reminder of the unknown lurking in the wilderness. If you're enjoying these terrifying tales, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a creepy story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Also, let me know in the comments which story scared you the most, or share your own chilling experiences. I'd love to hear them. Now let's get back to the story. As an avid hiker, I've always enjoyed exploring places that others tend to avoid. My latest adventure led me to Dudleytown Forest in Connecticut, an abandoned village infamous for its dark history and reputation for being haunted. Stories of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings didn't scare me. If anything, they drew me in. I entered the forest around noon, but right away, something felt off. The usual sounds of wildlife were completely absent. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an eerie silence that weighed heavily on me. I've been to plenty of secluded spots before, but this place had a different energy. I decided to push forward, marking my path with small stickers on the trees, something I'd done for years to ensure I never got lost. It wasn't long before the silence was broken by a distant wail. It wasn't the kind of sound you would expect from an animal. There was no wind, no breeze to explain it, and the wail felt unnatural, like it was coming from deep within the earth. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was just my mind playing tricks, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. Despite the growing unease, I continued on, determined to see it through. That's when I noticed strange carvings on the trees. They weren't just random marks, there was something deliberate about them. Jagged slashes and symbols that didn't seem familiar. My gut told me to leave, but I ignored it and pressed on. But as I retraced my steps, I realized something chilling. My trail markers were no longer where I had placed them. The stickers I had put up had been moved, some higher on the tree than I remembered, leading me toward a cave that wasn't there before. A sudden wave of panic washed over me. Someone or something was altering my path. I turned and started running, but the silence was oppressive. Every step seemed louder than the last, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up as though something unseen was right behind me. I pulled out my phone and checked the GPS, desperate to see the path back to my car, but the signal was gone. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed it. With no other option, I pushed through the woods, my breath quickening as I stumbled forward. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence, and I could feel eyes on me, watching from the shadows. Just when I thought I was completely lost, I spotted the outline of my car through the trees. I ran toward it, heart racing, and jumped in as fast as I could. I locked the doors and sped away, barely breathing until I was miles from the forest. I never did figure out what happened in Dudleytown Forest that day, but the feeling of being hunted, of something trying to manipulate my every move, stayed with me. Even now, whenever I think back on it, the eerie quiet of that place sends a chill down my spine. When I was a kid, my home was the ultimate hangout spot for my friends, and there were a few reasons for that. My dad had this massive man cave in the basement stocked with a never-ending supply of beer, and my parents would let us drink down there without too many questions, as long as we kept it low-key. I lived on a large piece of land, and our house was right next to a pretty dense patch of woods. If you walked through the trees from my place, you'd eventually reach a dirt road. Across that road, you'd find the reservoir, a place I've always held close to my heart since I was young. I was notorious for cutting holes in the fence surrounding the reservoir, so many, in fact, that the Water Commission eventually gave up on fixing them. It's illegal to trespass on the property, but as a kid, it became my sanctuary. I'd go there to smoke, escape my parents, swim, or just think. It was peaceful, and honestly, it was the only thing I really miss about those days. One evening, my friends and I were down in the basement playing pool and blasting EDM when Chester had the idea to take a hike through the woods to the reservoir. The boredom was kicking in, so we all agreed. The sun hadn't set yet, so it wasn't too hard to navigate. There were 5 of us, me, Chester, Rick, Jasper, and Hassan. I remember that Rick and Hassan grabbed some beers for the walk, as they were the bigger drinkers in the group. I'd already had a couple, so I didn't want to overdo it. The reservoir was massive, so even after crossing the fence, we still had a decent walk ahead of us. The woods were still a bit muddy from the earlier rain, but we were committed to making it there. We walked for a while and decided to head to the far side of the reservoir, where we used to hang out by a spot we called the beach. To get there, we had to walk along the near side of the reservoir, cross a section, and then follow the far side until we reached it. After about 20 minutes of walking, we finally reached the far side, but that's when things started to get strange. Hassan pointed toward the distance, and we all froze. We were still a bit far from the beach, but we could see something moving on our side of the reservoir. As it got closer, we realized it was dragging something. The figure was getting closer to the water, and the more we watched, the more we could see. It was dragging a large black garbage bag that seemed heavy. We didn't want to jump to conclusions, but we couldn't help but think the worst. Over the years, there had been a few bodies discovered in the reservoir, so our minds immediately went there. The figure stopped by the water, knelt down over the bag, and stayed there for a while. We figured it was the perfect moment to leave, but before we could, Chester spotted something else that made our blood run cold. From deeper in the woods, 3 more figures appeared, 2 dragging more bags, and the 3rd carrying a kayak. I felt sick to my stomach. Considering how close we were to a crime-heavy town, this scenario was beginning to feel all too real. The first guy climbed into the kayak, and the others helped him load one of the bags onto his lap. He paddled out into the reservoir, and we watched as the bag sank beneath the water. He repeated this process twice more. It was like something from a crime movie, and the tension was unbearable. Just then, my phone rang, breaking the silence. I scrambled to mute it, but the sound was loud enough to alert the figures. They all froze and turned toward us. The moment they saw us, we bolted. I've never been so scared in my life. Running through the woods, knowing they were right behind us, felt like a nightmare, though we ran as fast as we could, cutting across the woods and heading back to the hole in the fence. But in my panic, I couldn't remember where the hole was. I reached the fence first, and my friends caught up, panicking as they realized I couldn't find the hole. I was on the verge of giving up when Rick spotted it and yelled. We scrambled through it as fast as we could, just as we heard a branch snap behind us. We weren't safe yet. We ran all the way back to my house and collapsed in my backyard, finally catching our breath. Hassan immediately called the police and reported everything we had seen. They assured us they would send a squad car. We were relieved to be safe, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that they might have followed us. The path from the reservoir to my house wasn't far, and they could easily have tracked us. The police arrived quickly and listened to our story. They searched my property for signs of anyone following us, and my stomach dropped when they found muddy footprints leading to my backyard fence. They asked me if I was sure they weren't ours, and I told them we hadn't left any tracks there. The police didn't find anyone on my property, but they assured us they'd keep us informed. To my surprise, they did. A few days later, the police recovered 3 bodies from the reservoir. It became a major news story for a while, but my family was shaken. We never found out who those men were, but we feared they knew where we lived. For months afterward, my mom claimed to have seen people lurking in the woods at night. She even swore she saw a flash of light from a camera one evening. It's one of the reasons we ended up moving out of that house. Looking back, I can't shake the feeling that something wasn't right with that place. The reservoir is cursed, and there are still secrets hidden there. If you're enjoying these terrifying tales, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a creepy story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Also, let me know in the comments which story scared you the most, or share your own chilling experiences. I'd love to hear them. A few years back, my friends and I stayed at Bally's Hotel in Las Vegas. Originally the MGM Grand, it had a tragic history. A fire in 1980 killed 85 people. The smoke from the fire traveled into the hotel tower, and even decades later, guests reported smelling smoke and experiencing strange occurrences. We weren't aware of these spooky reviews when we booked. We just saw a great deal for rooms that weekend. On the second night, after a few casinos and dinner, we returned to the room to regroup before heading back out. After pre-gaming with some drinks, we went to Omnia nightclub. The liquor had kicked in by the time we got there, and my memory became hazy. I vaguely recall the dance floor and talking to my friends, but blacked out soon after. When I left the club, I was alone and somehow made it back to our room on the 17th floor. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt the room spinning when I heard a child coughing outside the door. Checking the peephole, I saw no one. Later, as I tried to sleep, the coughing returned. Then the smoke alarm went off, flashing a red light. Each blink illuminated a figure, a boy, standing in the corner of the room, facing the bed. I froze, too terrified to move. On the 4th blink, the boy disappeared and the alarm stopped. Heart racing, I stayed awake until my friends returned, not telling them what I'd seen. The next day, I researched the hotel's history and found that others had reported seeing and hearing a boy coughing on the 17th and 18th floors. Needless to say, I was relieved our stay was only 3 nights. In 2018, my friends and I went to the Electric Daisy Carnival, EDC, in Las Vegas. Excited and nervous, I decided to try Molly for the first time, encouraged by my friends. At first, everything was euphoric, the music, the lights. But soon the crowd and chaos overwhelmed me, and I realized I'd lost my friends. Panicked, I wandered aimlessly until a man approached me. He seemed normal, dressed casually, and offered to help me find my friends. Trusting him in my vulnerable state, I followed him to a quieter area where he claimed to call Jess, one of my friends. He told me they had left for Airbnb and suggested we take an Uber there. On the way to the exit, his questions about my plans, my name, and even my number fell off. Something about him seemed wrong, but my mind was too cloudy to think clearly. In the Uber he'd called, the feeling of unease grew. When I told him I felt sick and needed to use the restroom, he had the driver pull over at a gas station. I ran inside, locked myself in the bathroom, and waited shaking. When I finally came out, the Uber and the man were gone. I borrowed a phone from someone at the gas station and called Jess. She and the others were still at the festival, frantically looking for me. I rejoined them hours later, shaken. The man had never called Jess, and I still wonder what his true intentions were. When my friend Dom turned 21, he organized a group trip to Las Vegas with our closest friends. We booked rooms at the Gold Coast Hotel and Casino, just a short 5-minute walk from the Strip. There were 6 of us in total, split across 3 rooms with 2 people sharing each room. I was sharing mine with Joey. Our flight landed around 5 p.m., so by the time we unpacked and settled in, it was close to 7. Feeling hungry, we decided to hit In-N-Out Burger for dinner. a novelty for us East Coasters. After that, we wandered around until we ended up at the Bellagio's massive casino. There, we naturally split into smaller groups. Joey and I found ourselves at the slot machines, not to gamble much, but to enjoy the free drinks that the cocktail waitresses offered. Meanwhile, 3 others headed to the blackjack tables, and the 6th member of our group disappeared somewhere. After a while, we joined our friends at the blackjack tables. An hour passed, and we decided to leave the casino and head to Lily Bar and Lounge. On the way, I did a quick pat down on my pockets and had that sinking realization my wallet was missing. I retraced my steps to the Bellagio, desperate to find it, but came up empty-handed. My final hope was the hotel room. Back at the Gold Coast, I used Joey's key card to get into our room. After a frantic search that turned up nothing, I collapsed on the bed, defeated. Then, I remembered the front desk. I called and asked if anyone had turned in a wallet. The worker asked my name, and then something strange happened. She mentioned speaking to me just 5 minutes earlier, saying I'd asked for my room number. That wasn't possible. I'd been gone for hours. A cold dread set in. I hung up and glanced around the room. The closet was empty, but the bathroom door was closed. Taking a deep breath, I swung it open. Nothing, except a shadow behind the shower curtain. Terrified, I ran out and called hotel security. Within minutes, 2 guards arrived. They entered the room and found a man standing in the middle of it, wearing a mask and holding my wallet. He tricked the front desk into giving him our room number. The police arrested him, and I got my wallet back. While no one was hurt, the experience was a chilling reminder of how dangerous the situation could have been if I had confronted him alone. This story happened when I was 15 years old. My best friend, Anthony, invited me over for a sleepover because his parents were gone for the weekend. I rode my bike to his house, parked it in his backyard, and entered through the back door. We spent hours playing every video game he had, from FIFA to Call of Duty. Junk food and popcorn were scattered all over the floor as we indulged. When we got bored of gaming, we started a movie, but didn't finish it, eventually moving on to prank calls around 10 p.m. Anthony dialed a few pizza places and got some laughs. When it was my turn, I decided to call random numbers. On my 4th attempt, a man with a deep, raspy voice answered. Yeah, instead of the usual hello. Anthony's laughter in the background threw me off, and I couldn't keep a straight face. I tried to recover and said, sir, would it be all right if I borrowed one of the wheels from your car? The man paused before replying. What's your name, kid? I stammered, Bob. He interrupted. Really? You sure it's not Anthony? That hit me like a truck. I glanced at Anthony, whose face was pale with fear. Panicking, I hung up the phone immediately. Who was that? I asked him. I don't know, he stuttered. We checked if Anthony's caller ID displayed his name, but it only showed his dad's name. Desperate for answers, we searched online, but found nothing that explained how someone could know his name so quickly. We posted on Yahoo Answers, but no help came. Later that night, we decided to sleep in the living room and resumed the unfinished movie. Just as the prank call faded from my mind, we both froze. The front storm door creaked open, followed by the knob of the main door jiggling against the lock. Anthony quickly turned off the TV, and I peeked out the window. A tall man stood at the door. When he noticed the blinds move, he turned his gaze directly at me. I jumped back and whispered, "The back door." I left it open. The gate to the backyard creaked, and Anthony urged me to shut the door. As I approached, I froze. A dark silhouette stood at the door, peering inside. The man stepped inside. Terrified, I crept back to the kitchen and motioned for Anthony to head upstairs. We hid under his bed, concealed by the cloth covering the frame. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house, coming closer to the stairs. The bedroom door creaked open, and silence filled the room. Anthony's breathing was too loud. I covered his mouth, my heart pounding as footsteps approached the bed. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted as Anthony was dragged out. Grabbing a screwdriver from the nightstand, I drove it into the man's back, causing him to release Anthony. We bolted outside, running into the woods and hiding behind a bush. The man scanned the tree line, but didn't see us. Eventually, he ran in another direction, and we returned to the house, locking every door. The police were called. As I patrolled the backyard, I turned on the lights and saw him near the woods. He disappeared into the shadows. We never saw him again. To this day, I wonder if the prank call had something to do with it. I stayed the night at my friend Paul's house after an argument with my wife. Paul had a spacious house, and he offered me one of his 3 guest bedrooms. The rooms were lined up in a row, with his own room across the hall. Late that night, I started hearing strange noises from the room next to mine. Assuming Paul was in there, I checked with him, but he was already in bed. He explained that the 2 unused guest rooms were always locked because he stored personal belongings there. I tried to ignore the noises and went back to bed. But about 30 minutes later, I heard faint tapping from the wall and what sounded like a voice. Alarmed, I rushed to Paul's room again. This time, he took me seriously and grabbed the keys to check the locked room. Inside, the window was wide open and the closet door was ajar. The bed had signs of someone sleeping on it, and Paul's valuables were gone. Realizing something was very wrong, we checked the 3rd guest room. As soon as we unlocked the door, we saw a dark figure jump out the window onto the patio roof. We ran outside but couldn't catch him. Returning to the 3rd room, we found blood-stained sheets and a butter knife lying on the closet floor. Paul realized his home had been infiltrated for at least a week. The intruders were stealing food and belongings while hiding in plain sight. The people responsible were never caught. When I was 10 years old, I had my first sleepover at my friend Jordan's house. We played video games in his basement until late at night before crashing on the couches. Sometime during the night, I woke up to find the TV still on, casting a dim light across the room. In the corner near the stairs, I saw a tall, shadowy figure that almost reached the ceiling. Before I could react, the TV turned off, plunging the room into darkness. Terrified, I shut my eyes and stayed still until I somehow fell back asleep. I woke up to the sound of Jordan's mom screaming upstairs. We rushed to his parents' room to find her sobbing while his dad searched the house. There were no signs of anyone entering or leaving. Years later, Jordan told me his mom admitted to seeing a tall, dark figure standing by their bedroom door that night. The same figure I saw in the basement. If you're enjoying these terrifying tales, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a creepy story. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Also, let me know in the comments which story scared you the most, or share your own chilling experiences. I'd love to hear them. My name is Samantha. I'm 20 years old and work the night shift at a Walmart in a small town called Jackson, Alabama. Since I don't attend school full-time, my boss often schedules me for the overnight shifts. Back when the store operated 24/7, I worked from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. One quiet night, around 11:30 p.m., a customer approached me while I was folding pants in the men's section. He asked if we had a different size for a specific pair of jeans. I politely told him that what was on the rack was all we had. He thanked me, but I couldn't shake the awkwardness of our accidental eye contact. Hours later, while restocking appliances, I noticed someone through the shelves of the next aisle, staring at me. It was the same man. He looked away as soon as I noticed him. Something felt off. He had been in the store for hours without buying anything. Later, while I was in the dairy cooler, the door suddenly burst open. Peeking through a gap in the boxes, I saw the same man entering the cooler. Terrified, I hid behind a large box of eggs. When I finally looked up, he was standing right there smiling. I screamed, pushing the box of eggs at him and running for help. When I found another worker, the man appeared and claimed to be from corporate. He apologized and left quickly. Suspicious, I asked my manager the next day if anyone from corporate named Tom had been scheduled to visit. She confirmed that no such person existed. Reviewing the security footage, we saw the man had been stalking me for hours. A police report was filed, and I refused to work night shifts after that. It was the Thursday before Black Friday, and I was shopping late at Walmart for a laptop. Around 11 p.m., I grabbed the last one of a great deal. Suddenly, a disheveled man approached me, demanding the laptop. When I told him it was the last one, he grew angry and caused a scene. Uncomfortable, I quickly walked away and got in line to pay. Later that night, after setting up my new laptop at home, I noticed the motion-activated light outside my house had turned on. I ignored it, thinking it was an animal, but then my car alarm went off. Looking out the window, I saw a strange car parked on the street and someone sitting inside. Terrified, I told my mom, who checked the peephole and saw the same man from Walmart standing on our doorstep. He tried the doorknob and then started pounding on the door. My mom called the police. Moments later, we heard the sound of shattering glass. The man had broken into our den. We locked the door and waited for the police, who arrived quickly. They found the man hiding behind a couch and arrested him. He screamed threats at me the entire time. This incident made me realize how dangerous some people can be, even in a seemingly ordinary place like Walmart. Working overnight shifts at Walmart was my second job while finishing college. One Thursday night, midway through my shift, I spotted someone out of the corner of my eye. They weren't wearing a staff uniform like the other two employees working with me. Curious and uneasy, I checked the aisle, but no one was there. Moments later, I heard a loud crash. A bicycle had fallen off its hook, but the hook was still intact, as if someone had intentionally knocked it down. As I walked through the store, I heard a chilling laugh coming from the next aisle. Turning the corner, I saw a man dressed in all black standing at the end of the aisle, his back to me, but his head slightly turned so I could see part of his face. My heart sank. I called out to my coworkers, but they didn't respond. I decided to return to the employee lounge and call for help, but the man was gone when I came back. To this day, I don't know who or what I encountered that night.